Welcome. My name is Greg Gunlock. I'm the Chief Negotiator for the UNF bargaining team. I'm joined today by Jenny Ziegler, Maria Altalano, James Beasley, and Emily McCann from UFF. We also have with us the UNF BOT team, represented by Mike Matamore from Allen Norton and Blue. Mike, do you want to introduce your team members in attendance?
I'm going to have them introduce themselves, but like you said, Greg, I am Mike Matamore of Allen Norton Blue. And Marianne, why don't you introduce yourself, then we'll go around to each of our team members.
Sure, Marianne Jaffe, Academic Affairs.
John Kantner, what am I? I'm AVP of Research, Dean of the Grad School.
Justin Sorrell in the General Counsel's Office.
Daniel Nicholas, Human Resources.
I think that's it, Greg.
Right.
So go ahead.
All right. It is June 18th, 2020. We're here as part of the negotiations surrounding the UNF-UFF collective bargaining agreement. This meeting follows from the requirements of Article 8.3C of the CBA, which provides that if any rule, policy, or resolution proposed by the university administration has a direct and substantial impact on wages, hours, or terms or conditions of employment, the university administration shall, upon UFF's request, engage in collective bargaining with respect to the impact of the change prior to implementing it. As we've talked about before in our prior meetings, basically these negotiations are over how a decision of the administration affects faculty, and importantly, how those effects can be prevented. I'd like to welcome everybody and get right to it, I guess. So let me provide a little bit of a backdrop to how we did get here, if I can get my slides to work. And I'll highlight these, but this allows us to permit a record. I think everybody now is familiar with the mid-March time period where the state university system asked all universities in the system to go to remote instruction. This was followed from messages from both UFF and UNF in terms of transitioning to remote instruction and work. We, both teams began immediate negotiations, commencing with a discussion on the 13th at the conclusion of a normal contract negotiation time. And then following that, we're continuing discussions between the groups and a formal impact bargaining session on the 3rd of April. An agreement was reached on the 10th of April at that time concerning intellectual property and a number of other different concerns that have been identified. Following that original agreement, we continued to bargain over remaining items. There were 3 at the time, but over time we have since focused on 1, and that is concerning safe access to the university, both during the summer and in the fall, and the idea of incorporating CDC guidelines into those protocols. In the ensuing period, there have been town halls, there have been surveys, and there have been draft blueprints on the part of UNF for returning to campus. At our last session on the 11th, we talked about those safe access protocols, and we heard from stakeholders surrounding the importance of those CDC guidelines. We also discussed that other Florida universities and colleges had committed to following those guidelines in various ways. We saw evidence from a UFF joint UNF faculty survey that provided support for the following of CDC guidelines. We had 2 faculty members who provided faculty in-person testimonials about their concerns and the utility of the CDC guidelines. We also had a person submit a testimonial who did not testify in person. We discussed the role of a formal agreement codifying the CDC guidelines and its importance and urgency. In addition, we had been tracking some evolving conditions in the broader community that urged adoption of the guidelines. And finally, we laid out, at least from our perspective, the kind of guiding principles for why we are asking the university administration to incorporate in a formal way those CDC guidelines. I was pleased to also recall that we did exchange proposals at that time, and both parties committed to following those CDC guidelines, at least at the level of incorporation. And so we'll be talking more about that today. As far as today's session, between now and the last bargaining session, which is just over a week ago, we have seen reports of national, state, and local cases and local community spread. We'd like to talk a little bit more about those. As well, we have received information about a number of different initiatives around the country and locally concerning what are called CDC pledges, where institutions and members of the communities are asking their constituents or their members to pledge to follow the CDC guidelines. So here we are, it's the 18th, and the parties have had proposals from one another in each hand. But I also wanted to point out that tomorrow, there is going to be continuing discussion on a broader context surrounding the topics that we're discussing today, where UNF administration will be hosting a town hall where faculty can interact with the working group leaders that have been assembled to put together the UNF draft plan in response to the Board of Governors. So Mike, what I'd like to get your agreement to is for us to present a couple of short slides on what we're seeing in the local community and more nationally about the number of cases and community spread, as well as talk a little bit about these CDC pledges just to get them on the record. And then I thought that the focus of our time could be directed towards resolving our commitments to these CDC guidelines so that we can reach a signature on a memorandum of understanding that codifies both of our commitments to follow those CDC guidelines. Is that amenable?
We're very willing to accept and to consider any information that you want to provide to us or any suggested agreement that you want to propose. So please go ahead.
Great. Well, thanks, Mike. And let's do it this way. We'll talk about some information because we think that increasingly this is becoming a issue that we need to broaden our understanding of what's going on in the surrounding community and in Florida and nationally to kind of understand why these CDC guidelines are so important. So a couple of the team members, I think Jenny will be talking to us about some of these reports in the media. Jenny, do you want to take it?
Sure. So we would like to contextualize further with some recent information of what's happening around our region, our state, and our city. We're seeing a lot of areas in local businesses around Jacksonville. Recently, you might have seen in the national news in Jacksonville Beach. And this is closely following the state's uptick in cases. You know, as you can see here on the screen, Florida seems to be a new hotspot and epicenter of COVID-19 outbreaks. We're seeing, you know, kind of continuing this conversation about the national news. We're seeing Lynch's Irish Pub, certainly, in headlines. And this is in addition to other closures such as Taco Lou, Angie's Sub Shop, Mellow Mushroom, the Mini Bar, the Tavern on First, the Rec Tiki Lounge, Catullo's, Hop Singer, among many others, which are closing due to patrons and employees testing positive for COVID-19 and needing to be deeply sanitized according to these businesses, according to CDC guidelines. So we're very concerned that this is a microcosm of what may happen on our campus, of which we have roughly 17,000 students, and that's just students. And so to make a formal commitment to these guidelines is more timely than ever. And I do want to just make a special note that unfortunately, Florida is seeing 2,610 new cases today with 25 fatalities.
So thank you, Jenny. This presents kind of the context against which these discussions are taking place. Mike, did any of your members have any questions, or did you have questions regarding this? I know you're seeing some of this over in Tallahassee. I think the bars that we're talking about here and the pubs and the restaurants, these are all restaurants and locales that are visited by our students. And you know, obviously when the university does reopen, the types of things that are happening here are going to happen in the absence of some types of steps to ensure that they don't.
Right, I'm familiar with the location of the establishments that have been identified associated with this slide. And I know that they're located in the proximity of the university. I don't have any questions, though. I don't know if anyone from my bargaining team has any questions. I don't think so.
All right. Well, thank you, Jenny. And what we'll do is turn to Jim Beasley, and he'll talk a little bit about these CDC pledges that are popping up across the country and here locally. James?
Thank you, Greg, and thank you to the teams. A number of municipalities and counties are taking it upon themselves to initiate not formal contracts, but the social contract, pledging to their patrons that they are following the CDC guidelines in cleaning of spaces and using of masks and social distancing. And so we see a number of these initiatives where St. Johns County, for example, you can, if you're a business in St. Johns County, you can sign to take the pledge. You get a media kit that puts on your establishment the fact that you signed this pledge to commit to the CDC guidelines. A number of other municipalities throughout the South are doing this as well. Savannah has a large pledge campaign, as well as cities like Lexington, Asheville, and Greenville. And it's just a way for these businesses to alert their patrons that we are following the CDC guidelines, we commit to them, and you can trust us to be able to do that. So we see this as kind of a community values initiative that we are all beholden to one another, and we're going to commit to do that. We see a number of these initiatives that are increasing, and we are encouraged by the number of initiatives around Duval County, and we'd like to have a similar situation here in Duval County, here at UNF, as a part of our UNF community, that we pledge to each other that we are committed to the CDC guidelines in the protection of our safety. So, thank you.
So Jim, you mentioned the distinction between a social contract and a formal contract. I think that bears merit a short kind of conversation. In other words, these are citizens and members of institutions that represent citizens, whether it be the Savannah Area Chamber of Commerce or the Palm Coast and the Flagler Beaches, or just St. Johns County at large, or the cities of Lexington, Asheville, and Greenville. And they're asking people to take the pledge. In other words, to commit socially through a social contract to follow the CDC guidelines. So that reinforces, I think, the ask that we're presenting to UNF to not only pledge in an informal way, but also to pledge more formally. Mike, did you have your members of your team, or you have any questions? I'm not, these were kind of popped up to us based on people sending us information. So I don't know if anybody else has seen these, but they seem to be popping up increasingly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not familiar with these pledges or these initiatives in these localities, but I think I understand how you described them, which is that they're initiatives that they're asking people to understand and proceed safely so that the pandemic is limited. Although I assume that no one in this group is being asked to sign a legal contract to that effect, right?
I imagine that in some institutions where they are employed, they may be being asked to sign as a part of their working arrangement an agreement to follow the CDC guidelines.
You mean an employee?
Yeah.
An employee would have to sign something before they could go to work?
Yes, yes. I think we could probably find examples of that.
I think you could probably find examples of that.
Yeah.
But I guess these are sort of outside of the contract. I mean, that's probably some acknowledgement on the part of the employees of what's expected of them when they go to work. And I understand that. I think I know of employers that are actually doing that. They're making people like tap an app every day saying, I'm agreeing to these protocols. And if I'm not agreeing to these protocols, I go home. I know that's out there. I think we understand what is involved here. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's. We wanted to present that as a little bit of a backdrop to today's conversation because it helps to further contextualize and support the kind of commitments I think that both teams appear to be prepared to make. And in that regard, I wanted to bring us back to kind of where we ended the last time we met. And on the left side of the screen, you can see the proposal that was put forth by UNFBOT. This information was shared with our team at our last meeting on the 11th. And then at that time, we had also presented a proposal, and that proposal is on the right. Since that time, we obviously have looked closely at your proposal, and I probably understand that you have as well. One of the things we did in a good faith effort to help us reach agreement was to take and identify the particular concepts and ideas and topics that were being presented through the BOT proposal. And you can see those have been parceled out and color coded to the left. And in a good faith effort, we said, we understand and we acknowledge, and we thought that, well, why don't we incorporate those verbatim into the proposal that we were providing to you. And so you can see to the left there is your proposal. And I didn't do a word count, but I'll bet we get to about 99% of all of the text of your proposal has been incorporated word for word in our proposal. So we're hoping that we will find the slightly revised proposal that we have here to the right even more agreeable than when we first presented it. Let me point out a couple of domains in the proposal, and then I'll summarize it for you. It's a memorandum of understanding. It's something we've been working on. It's one we already agreed to on a variety of other topics. This one focuses on the commitment of the university to not only incorporate the CDC guidelines, as well as the Florida Department of Health guidelines and the Duval County Department of Health guidelines into their protocols. And we have since understood that these protocols are going to be captured in the university's environmental health and safety procedures, which are available on the emergency management website. We think that's a good idea, and we agree with the notion of incorporating. But we think that incorporating is just as it sounds. It means incorporating the guidelines into the procedures, but we'd ask that you go further than that and that you commit to complying with the recommendations when implementing those proposals, that you update them over time to reflect any changes, and that you enforce the protocols that incorporate the recommendations. And I think what we're hoping is for a level of commitment here that will help faculty members and associated stakeholders feel comfortable with the university in its reopening plan. Some of the other things that we've incorporated here is based on earlier concern on your part that there may be inconsistencies between some of the recommendations across these different institutions. We're simply asking UNF not to document, that was a concern also, but just simply adhere to the safest working condition or the safest recommendation, or the recommendation that facilitates the safest working conditions and really creates the safest environment for faculty, students, and staff and any visitors. We also, in hearing your concerns about the potential that if there was a deviation from one of these recommendations that was technical or minimal, we've included provisions in this memorandum that would ensure that neither party would take recourse unless the failure to comply with the recommendations was essentially affected in a substantial way the working conditions, the safety of the environment for faculty, staff, and others. In the top part of the proposal, you can see we've incorporated a lot of the language that you had identified as important from a statement standpoint, and we agree with that as well. In other words, we, up at the top here, we do understand that it is a shared community responsibility for the safety of our faculty, students, and staff, and I think faculty are committed to that shared responsibility. We also agree with the notion that UNF and others must remain agile and ready to revise the operating procedures as necessary based upon new updated scientific evidence and guidance, much like the evidence and guidance that we just described in terms of new information that's occurring about the number of cases, the percentage of positives, and the local community spread. We also are committed and agree with the idea that all of us need to work together on this and that we need to assume responsibility to follow these guidelines. In other words, I think faculty are committed to following these guidelines and we're willing to agree to that. Finally, we acknowledge that, as you point out through your proposal, that we're really only going to be successful if each person accepts the responsibility to take care of one another, particularly in light of the way that the pandemic COVID-19 can spread and how people who are asymptomatic can communicate the disease to other people without even knowing it. So we think what we've done here is put together a proposal that I'm hoping that we both can agree to. Basically, at this point, I think you've agreed through your proposal to incorporate the guidelines. We're asking you to take these additional steps to comply, to update, to enforce, and of course we're saying enforce for both faculty and administrators, to address inconsistencies as we've described, and to agree on the provisions for recourse that we've talked about. So going back to the proposal, I'll just leave that on the table. Mike, what are your thoughts? Can we get you to sign his today?
Well, I think it's very interesting, and I appreciate the movement that's been made to bring these two documents closer together. I'm very much encouraged by the fact that we can all agree that this is a circumstance that requires everybody's contribution and responsibility. I think it's one of the things that we were looking for in the document that we put out, because, you know, everyone, the university's administration cannot carry this alone. This is going to be an effort, a good faith effort by everyone to stay safe and take steps, even if it's reporting violations or keeping yourself safe and removed from a situation that's unsafe. So I think what I'd like to do, Greg, you know, and I know this video conferencing is somewhat difficult because I can't look over at my team members necessarily and get a sense of how they feel about it. And I'd like to talk to them about what you proposed. So if I may, I'd like to have my team go into a caucus, and then we'll get back with you as soon as we can.
All right, why don't we do this, Mike? I think that's a terrific idea. I will send you a copy of the proposal to the right. Shall we set a time for returning from the caucus? Given our session today is supposed to go till 4. Do you want to go 40 minutes or half an hour? What's best for you guys, your team?
Well, let's all agree on a time now. Is it 3 o'clock now?
It is 3:02, yes, already.
Yeah. Okay. Let's not do 40 minutes. I think that might be too long.
Okay.
Let's do 30 minutes and then get back together.
Sounds great. As soon as we drop the call here, I will send this on over and we can move on from there.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Memorandum of understanding. I think we're extremely close. And Marianne, can you share your product with the UFF bargaining team?
I'll stop sharing mine, and so she should be able to, Marianne, you should be able to share it. Mute. I think you might be muted.
Yeah, I'm working, you know what? I'm working off of 2 separate machines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send it to you, Greg.
Okay.
Okay, I'll do that right now.
All right, and then I'll put it up real quick. Here we
Yeah,
go.
that'd be great. Thank you. It's, I will tell you, Greg, that it's, the formatting is just a little wonky because I was trying to do it really quickly. And so
No worries.
I know that I need to clean that up if it gets to that, so.
Okay.
So we have language, we believe we have language that has a commitment to what we are able to commit to, which is the confluence of the CDC and the Florida Department of Health and other state or local entities that have jurisdiction over us. And so we have that. We have enforcement language. We have language requiring updating as required by the science of the moment. We're uncomfortable with if there is a distinction between one entity like the CDC and the Florida Department of Health going with what is the safest, because we think that term could be subject to debate. What is the safest in one agency might, a different approach might be deemed safer by another. And then we also have to, to some extent, there could possibly be some directives from the state that we would have to comply with, even if it may differ somewhat from the CDC. But we think we've addressed all of those things. We've punched this up, I think, and made it a lot tighter. We've incorporated the sense of commitment. We've incorporated a sense of enforcement. We've incorporated an obligation to update. And we also picked up what wasn't in our memorandum of understanding before was some of the language toward the end of the of your memorandum of understanding. I think it's now 6, 7, and 8. We've picked up your language there verbatim. We are submitting this to you for your consideration.
Well, thank you very much, Mike, and the BOT team. We really appreciate the good faith effort to kind of integrate these proposals in a way that meets all of our concerns and the needs on both sides. Given the 8 minutes that are remaining, it may be useful for us to take this document and look at it more closely, and then should it meet our needs and be acceptable, we would be willing to sign without the need for an additional meeting. If we did find areas of concern, would you be amenable to meeting next week to kind of hammer them out?
As long as it meets the notice requirements, that we can do that. We can certainly do that, and I think that's a reasonable way to proceed.
Okay. Any of my team members want to address any of the proposal as laid out? Actually, I should have done it this way, right?
And like Mary, we were running out of time, so we recognize that there's a little bit of a format.
No worries. No.
Yeah.
I think we can certainly work with this document. I thought I could blow it up here for us, but I guess not. Mike, thanks again. And it looks like there are no questions on our side. Why don't we leave it this way then? We'll take a close look at this. And again, once we have had time to look at it, we'll reach out to you with the notice provisions in mind if we need to meet next week. If not, we will sign and get it back to you, and we'll be on our way.
Okay.
Into the future, there are likely to be additional details as things emerge, and we appreciate your availability to talk about them at the table.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Mary Ann, for hosting this, and we'll see you soon.
All right, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Bye now.